13, 14, 15 years old, investing early, like the best time to invest is now, or was back then, and the second best time is today, right?
The problem is people start at 25 and 30. They don't realize how hard it is to go through ups and downs in markets. And once someone's gone through it 5, 6, 7 times.
Thinking to myself, what would be a really cool asset? I can help a lot of business owners. I can look at houses all day. I can help protect some really cool entrepreneurial ideas, which I've done.
If you could go back and give your younger self financial advice, what would it be? Welcome to today's PlanAssist Podcast, where we help people make better financial decisions based on 3 core principles. We use have a plan, be diversified, and seek counsel. And part of these podcasts is that seeking counsel. We're trying to help give you input, suggestions, ideas, things to think about, opportunity to ask questions. Today's podcast, I am super excited to have because it's on the protection side of it. As all of you know, when you start building wealth, you have kind of different parts of that building of wealth. And one of those is for protecting your lifestyle, protecting those assets. And today we're going to talk about that with Eric Hardek with Premier Group Insurance. He's local here. He's 5 miles away from where I live in Winter Garden and 1 city over. I live in Winter Garden. He's over 1 city in Mineola, but he's been here in Central Florida and Orlando for years. So with that, Eric, did I miss anything that you wanted to add?
No, that's it. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And yeah.
Awesome. So I start all these podcasts off with the same question. If you could go back and give your younger self financial advice, what would it be?
So I thought about that before coming on. And if there's one thing that I wish that I had done better as a middle schooler, teenager, was max out my Roth IRA as a kid. I started doing that way too late in life. And I wish that I had been less focused on friends and sports and more focused on at least making enough to maximize my Roth IRA when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. Because investing early, like the best time to invest is now, or was back then, and the second best time is today, right? So yeah. I wish that if I could go back, that's something that I would have done earlier, is just starting to put little chunks away, dollar cost average, as young as possible.
That's great. That is a really good advice. And not only how much money it can grow into, what I find is if you start early, you become much better investor. The problem is if people start at 25 and 30, they don't realize how hard it is to go through ups and downs in markets. And once someone's gone through it 5, 6, 7 times, they're just better investors. And that just takes time, whether it's $1,000, $10,000, $100,000.
Absolutely. I wish I had learned the investing game earlier. And the earlier you start, the longer you have to accumulate knowledge and figure out where to be, investing your hard-earned dollars. So that's something that I wish I had done earlier. And also like you said about acquiring knowledge, getting into the game and following stocks and the US markets or foreign markets and that type of thing. I just wasn't interested in it as a teenager. It didn't really apply to me, living too comfortable of a life. So I wish I had gotten into the game earlier. And that would be my best advice for other people, especially like myself. Like I have a young daughter, my wife, we have a son on the way. That's something that I hope that I can instill in my children, is at least getting them financially literate at an earlier age. And that's something that's really not taught in schools a lot this day and age either. So
I don't think it ever has been.
And that might be a topic for another day, but I wish that financial literacy was something that was taught in middle school, high school, in even elementary school.
So how'd you get into the insurance business?
And it's a really funny story. I had an awesome boss prior to starting this insurance business that always used to tell me to reverse engineer my life. And the way that Premier Group Insurance really started out with was, it was actually in 2019, right before COVID hit. And, thinking to myself, what would be a really cool asset that I can help a lot of business owners. I can look at houses all day. I can help protect some really cool entrepreneurial ideas, which I've done, and work from anywhere. And be able to, go and travel with my family and determine my own life, stop work at 3:00 when my daughter has a soccer practice or a game or a tournament or something to go to. And that's kind of where the idea came out. So it was a career change. I was working in a medical office and decided, hey, I'm going to build this insurance brokerage. And then COVID hit 2 weeks after I officially opened my LLC. So I just jumped into it. And, 5.5 years later, it's It's really cool. I feel like I've helped just a ton of people in Winter Garden, Windermere, Claremont, Mineola, and it's really become a really interesting business. Just helping people to ensure their greatest assets and their cherished possessions, right? Whether it's a steel fabrication business building a hotel, or it's a garbage business, or someone's $1 million house, or whatever it is. Yeah, it's become really cool.
That's fantastic. What a great story. One story that people who listen to this podcast will hear me say, and this isn't exactly, but it's pretty close. Charlie Munger was doing a shareholder meeting for Berkshire Hathaway, and someone asked him what his greatest lesson was. And he very quickly said, invert everything. And what he meant was he was a weatherman for the Army, was his kind of first job. And one thing he learned was to kind of look at everything, looks at, kind of the sunny days and all the stuff going on. But actually, the best lesson he ever learned was to look at the other side of it. And that's kind of what you did. It's not exact, but it's pretty close, from an inversion perspective, kind of look at another view of it is maybe the best way to describe what you're talking about.
I mean, with most things, whether it's business or your personal life or fitness, and you kind of say, here's where I want to be, here's the type of life I want to have, and here, what are the steps that can help me to get there?
Yeah, that's awesome. So what are the biggest kind of mistakes that you see clients make? I mean, just because you sit down with hundreds.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I've got a number of them.
Okay, good. Just get, let's just talk a little bit about 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. So, the number one thing on the home insurance side is underinsuring their home.
Okay.
That is the biggest thing that I see, right? So, like, worst case scenario, let's talk total fire loss. The house is gone. You have to rebuild, and we need to remove the debris and build the house up to the same like, kind, and quality that it was at prior to the loss. So many people, especially in Florida, right? Because home insurance rates for forever just went up and up and up and up and up. And, people get used to paying $1,200 for their home insurance. Now they're paying $4,000. And it just seems like it's this huge bill, right? But so many people undercut where their house should have been insured to. And people need to understand that this is a contract, and that carrier is only going to pay up to the policy limits. Okay. So if you've got a house that cost $1 million to rebuild and you're insured for $600,000, you're not getting that house rebuilt. So, a lot of people try to cut corners, and that's the last corner that you should be cutting. So
that's a good one. So before we go to the next one, or kind of talk about what I see happening, me personally, so I can use me as an example. That's an easy thing to have happen, because my house I insured for full value in 2018. And then all of a sudden my house is worth 50% more than what I insured it for. And I just haven't come back and updated it.
Yeah. And especially if you're following labor trends and the cost of materials and all of that, the cost to rebuild your house dramatically increased from 2021 to 2024 or 2025. So You have to be accounting for that, because the people that are going to be fixing your kitchen and rebuilding it, the labor is more expensive. The wood, the tile is so much more expensive, and that carrier is not going to pay more than the policy limit. So you're just not going to get a new house if you're underinsured. So that's good. Mistake number one.
Yep. Awesome. What's number 2?
Underinsuring your auto insurance for bodily injury liability. So especially here in Florida, right? So we have like 2 of the biggest personal injury attorneys in Florida work right here. They're like headquartered. We live in such a litigious society, and a lot of people don't understand. And that's why I work on education a lot with my clients, is those numbers for bodily injury. If you see like 1020 on your bodily injury coverage, someone sends you a quote, it looks so arbitrary on the other end, on the receiving side of the quote, right? So you just see these numbers, and then you see a big premium, and you're like, okay, like that premium's lower than another one. But people don't understand that if you rear end someone, it's going to be $10,000 of bodily injury coverage per person and $20,000 bodily injury coverage per accident. And $10,000 goes almost nowhere when someone gets hurt, and it goes to medical bills, lost wages, mental anguish. People need to take time off of work, where people really need to understand that $10,000 is not a lot of coverage when you're liable for someone else's bodily injury coverage. We recommend at least $100,000 per person and $300,000 per accident. But the honest truth is $100,000 doesn't go a long way too when it comes to medical bills. So that is mistake number 1 that I see with a lot of people, is just taking the cheapest auto insurance because the premium looked better than the rest, without understanding how at risk they are of having to be like, you're responsible for those bodily injury coverages above and beyond what your coverage is going to pay for.
So that takes me to a problem that I see a lot. So just kind of talking, this is why I'm excited to have you on the call. So I have a small investment practice, 50 households. And one of the things that I do when I do reviews is I'll take them through kind of the how's your money invested, what's your expenses, all those normal stuff that most financial advisors would do. And then one of the things that I'll touch on is protection. And I don't do insurance. So this is more like their takeaway insurance. But one of the things I do notice is that a lot of them don't have the level of insurance that they need, especially when it comes to an umbrella. I'm surprised how many of my clients, when I first get them, they do now because I kind of take them through it. But that kind of goes to the auto insurance as well. So I literally have a client who had too low of auto insurance premium. He had an umbrella policy, but they didn't match, right? Umbrella policies almost all start at $500,000 and go up, right? So you buy $1 million umbrella policy, it's 500,000 to $1 million. His auto policy only went to 250. So when there was a problem, there was a gap of $250,000. And so I see that a lot. And then the other thing so just umbrella policy, I don't see the gap a lot, but I see, not having an umbrella policy. I see that pretty regularly, but people do need an umbrella policy. And then if I get into the conversation with the umbrella policy, a lot of them will go with the cheapest umbrella policy, but they don't add the uninsured motorist to that umbrella policy. And I explained to them, why that's so important. So if you go out and hit someone on your bicycle on the trail, your auto policy is not going to kick in. But, if you go out and get hit by an uninsured motorist on your bicycle and that person doesn't have any insurance, now you're kind of going to be stuck with the bill where if you have uninsured motorists, that would kind of kick in. But if you don't have uninsured motorists, it wouldn't be covered. So that's kind of I'll stop there and let you just comment on.
That's such an interesting example because I have run into some of that stuff where, like a pedestrian gets hit by an uninsured motorist and then, the auto insurance, your own auto insurance kicks in. That's such an interesting example that you brought up. Well, a couple different things in Florida. You need to make sure that you are listing the underlying policies with the umbrella carrier. So in Florida, getting auto insurance liability is way more difficult than just getting a normal umbrella that's going to cover above and beyond your personal liability. So someone slips and falls at your house. They've got medical bills. They claim that you were negligent. And let's say you've got $300,000 worth of personal liability, but you have $1 million umbrella on top of that. You have $1.3 million worth of personal liability, but you need to make sure that you are also rating for the auto insurance liability as well. So in Florida, a lot of people have just umbrella coverage that covers their personal liability above a renter's or a home insurance policy, but then they've only got 10, 20 bodily injury coverage for their auto insurance, and that's it. You're not going to get an umbrella policy on top of that. So normally you need $250,500 is the bodily injury requirement, and same thing for uninsured motorist to make sure that a carrier will tack on the auto insurance liability to the umbrella. A lot of people miss that. When it comes to people that have like a lot of assets, you want to make sure that you're properly covered, and $250,500 just isn't enough if you have multiple homes and you have a lot of things that someone could potentially go after. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers you.
So what I find interesting is, and I see this with a lot of my clients. So you'll start off 30 years old, you go to work, you start putting money in a 401k, you buy a house, you go through, you start doing a little bit of investing. They just kind of go with whoever their insurance agent is, and they don't do regular reviews. Like as a financial advisor, we do annual reviews. You kind of can't get around that, right? It may not be actually annual, but it's something very close to that. So on a regular time schedule, you will sit down and go through, okay, here's how your investments are doing. What else is going on? What investments? I do that with my insurance agent, but I'm the one that does it. My agent doesn't call me and say, hey, Tim, we need to do a review. I'm the one that knows that I need to make sure I'm covering holes. So I think as a takeaway for people listening to this is, don't think of your insurance strategy or your insurance needs as kind of just a secondary off the corner of your desk. It needs to be something you seriously think about because it can cost you a lot of money.
So one thing that we do in our agency, because just like every other business, we all get busy. So we automate those questions. So we want to know at home insurance renewals, have you made any additions? Have you added a pool? Have you added any expensive jewelry that you want to make sure is insured to the proper value? Are you interested in umbrella coverages? Have you thought about flood? Those are the things that we automate just to make sure like that's at least in the back of people's heads, and they can just reply to that email and then book an appointment and say, yeah, like let's cover this and make sure that we're good here. Oh, I did add a driver and I forgot to add them to my policy. Let's make sure that they're covered. Are you interested in increasing your bodily injury limits? Those are things that we automate so that it's never missed and it's at least in the back of people's minds. But yeah, absolutely. If your financial situation has changed, we need to make sure that you're properly protected. The big thing that we say is like anything that you can't afford in cash should be insured. So if you can't afford to replace that expensive necklace, let's look at a schedule for it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mindset that we go about our business.
And then what about golf carts? So I have I have a policy on my golf cart, but I noticed, as you know, in Winter Garden, there's tons of golf carts running around. I would be surprised if half of them have any insurance on them at all.
Pretty sure there's a bunch of uninsured drivers that I see some people that are questionable of age driving those down Plant Street sometimes.
Exactly. It's crazy.
Make sure that you've got a policy on them. Sometimes you can add the liability to a home insurance policy, but honestly, they should be added as either a standalone auto or added onto your current auto insurance. Depending on the speed and whether it's registered as a street legal vehicle, kind of depends how you go about writing it, either on a standalone policy or just adding it to your existing auto insurance.
So I think that was the biggest mistake is underinsured kind of across the board. That's kind of my summary. When I was listening to you, is underinsure your house, underinsure your car, miss a golf cart, miss something and not even be insured. Is that a pretty good summary?
Yeah, absolutely. So state minimum limits on auto, no uninsured motorist coverage. I see that all the time. And the funny thing about it is uninsured motorist is the one time that your insurance is going to pay you. Right. So you can pay all this money to Progressive, Hartford, Mercury, and the only time that you'll get money back is that uninsured motorist coverage. So people miss that. And then the next biggest thing is $100,000 on personal liability, especially those Citizens policies, right? Everyone had Citizens for a while. I think they're still the biggest carrier in Florida. They only offer $100,000 in personal liability. So if you don't have a gap policy that goes above and beyond that, you're pretty exposed. $100,000 doesn't go a very long way.
So to kind of change the direction just a little bit to finish up on the conversation is, what are you using like with AI? So if you're a client, what are you utilizing? How do you see that changing our lives from an insurance perspective, or do you?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And I love artificial intelligence. I've used it to improve my processes. Whether just picking the brain of ChatGPT to figure out how to do things better in my agency. It has written a number of my automated emails just to sound more professional. I think it's going to improve the underwriting process for better or for worse. It had more data points and more brain power behind, is a risk acceptable? Is it not? Will make the better risk cheaper, and will make the risks that are more the high hazard risks are going to be more expensive. So the more data, the more brain power you have behind something, the better risks are going to get the more preferred rate, and the higher risks are going to have higher rates. I think it's going to improve customer service. I think it's going to make everything faster.
But like as a client, I guess what I see in my business that kind of overlaps in your business is AI is a really good place to get some of the stuff we just talked about. So there's a lot of people out there that says, well, I don't need an agent. I can just go get that information. And you can, and AI will help to some degree. But I think the one thing AI doesn't do is the product. It's like I tell people all the time, you realize that only 50% of Americans have a will, yet all of them know they need a will. And so it's not so much the information as much as someone needs to make sure that they're looking at your auto policy, your umbrella policy, have a conversation about, I'll give you something that I think is interesting about insurance is I just recently switched companies, and I've been told for 10 years from all different agents and everyone that if you have a windshield broken, it doesn't hurt it doesn't go against you. Okay. It's not a problem. Go fix your windshield. Right. Well, when we did the switch, I had one claim on my windshield. Now, it didn't hurt me. I still got it. It was one switch. And I would ask that agent, I said, I've always been told that's not a big deal. And he says, oh, that is really not true. He goes, one hit on your windshield, getting a new windshield, that's not the end of the world. but it does show up. If they see where you've gotten 3 windshields in the last 2 or 3 years, that's a big problem. And so that's an example of people just not really knowing factually how things can impact their lives.
Well, I'm going through that myself because I'm about to pay out of pocket for a windshield. So I think there's been some really good marketing around Florida having like zero deductible free windshields. And that's true, but it's still a claim. It still shows a pattern. And at the end of the day, we all understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Like you don't get free windshields. What I tell my clients is you do exactly what you said. You don't want to make a pattern of it because it is a comprehensive claim. And you'll likely pay for that windshield with future premiums. So I think going back to what you were saying with AI in insurance, I mean, I always think that there has to be that human component because we are humans. I think the agents that use AI to improve processes and provide a better customer experience are going to thrive. But you still need the human in the process because we can show empathy and we can say, I don't think you should do that. And here's why. And, here's an example of something I recently dealt with. Having that human interaction, I think is still going to be important, and having someone review your policy from the human perspective, I think is something that's still a huge value.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's probably the biggest misconception when it comes to AI. And it's why I ask you the question is AI can help us be much more efficient and better customer service or better clients for that matter, because it helps me like, well, what questions am I going to ask? But it doesn't replace my agent when I'm in the middle of a particular crisis and I can call him and say, hey, what about this? Or what about that? What's kind of the best way we kind of deal with it. So anyways, so I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything you wanted to kind of just add? I mean, like, it sounds like the biggest holes is underinsurance and kind of touching on that. And then the best way to kind of make sure you're not underinsured is just calling the agent and kind of walk through all your stuff that you have.
No, underinsured is the best way to put it. And that's a pretty broad way to look at it because like flood insurance isn't included in the standard home insurance policy. So that's why having like an agent to look at it and, hey, you're not in a flood zone, but you've got a pond behind your house. How high does that get during storms? We might want to get, a small amount of flood coverage on your home. And that would be another example of being underinsured, but looking at your personal liability, your limits on your auto insurance and having that human involved to really direct you on, hey, is $25.50 enough for bodily injury on your auto insurance? And, what kind of assets do you have? And where can we give you the best bang for your buck in terms of being protected, but not paying for something you don't need either?
Exactly. So then to finish up, what about kind of the other part of insurance? Do you do life insurance and do you do the other parts of it? So you're primarily focused on just the PNC, personal property.
Home, auto, and commercial, yeah.
Okay. And then what happens when you sit down with someone and they say, what about, you just have some relationships and partners like I do to help them with that particular part of it. And you become kind of a specialist and expert in just making sure that what needs to be insured is insured.
In our office, like we are Florida home and auto and commercial experts. That's what we do. Okay. We don't go outside of that lane. We don't write any policies outside of Florida. Like we are Florida experts. That's what we do.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. And I think that's exactly what you have to do to really be kind of top 1%, right? I mean, that's kind of the one thing that I think in order to really thrive as a business owner and as a person serving the public, we have to be in that kind of top 1% of service. And to do that, you got to be an expert.
Yeah, especially with Florida, with how complicated home insurance carriers are. We just had to really dive into that niche and we didn't want to go outside it because when people try and come from the outside into Florida, they don't know what they're doing. So like it's just our niche, just being really good here.
Good. So to finish up, why don't you give me kind of your contact information and name again, and so that people can reach out. That's all right.
My name is Eric with Premier Group Insurance. We do home, auto, and commercial insurance. The best way to get in touch with us is to just go to our website at pgicentralflorida.com. Just click get a quote. And the fastest way to get a quote is to just fill out our intake form. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes. You will get an automated email that's going to ask for a couple follow-up steps. And that is the best way to reach us, is to just go to our website.
That's awesome. And making sure that your house is insured and your auto insurance and that you have a liability. I can't stress enough about that whole umbrella policy. If you're someone that has a decent amount of money or you're going into retirement, An umbrella policy is a relatively inexpensive way to make sure that if something does happen, you're going to have attorneys to help fight against it. If you don't have an umbrella policy and your top, whatever your policy is, the insurance company just pays it out, then you're kind of on your own. Where if you have an umbrella policy with a big enough number in there, you're not really going to be on your own. You're going to be kind of out there working with the insurance company and with their policy. So with that, thank you so much, Eric. Thanks for coming on, and I appreciate you taking a few minutes to help people get more informed on auto and homeowners insurance.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Thanks. Have a great day.